Hello, and welcome to the Regrettable Century. We are back with some utter popery. We are reading I guess we're starting the first few chapters. We'll see how many we get through. Of Laudato Si, or Care for Our Common Home. This will be part 2 of our series, so if you haven't listened to the first one yet, then maybe you should. And just for those of you who might have forgotten, this is an encyclical written by the late Pope Francis about climate change and, well, not just climate change. It's about it covers a number of subjects, but it has a lot to do with care for the poor and climate change and what the obligations of Christians are to care for our common home. But anyway, so this is a pretty radical document from the point of view of most Christians. But as we discussed last time, it's kind of standard fare for Catholic doctrine. But it is a pretty radical anti-capitalist document, which you might not know this, but there is a strain of radical anti-capitalism within Catholicism. And we're here to sort of talk about what is, we're here to sort of talk about how we as radicals, as anti-capitalists, as Marxists, and Marxist adjacent people anyway, are how we should relate to that. So, yeah. Oh yeah, and by the way, it's Chris, Jason, Mir, and Ben. What's up, everybody?
Yo.
Hey.
And we're missing Daniel this week because he is
zombie.
He's a zombie. Yeah, he's laid low by some
by
sort of
the sins of the flesh.
When your introduction to this, when you just said people may not realize the anti-capitalist strain of Catholicism, I was thinking to myself, oh, you mean like the mainstream version that's in the Bible? That
Yeah.
That the Pope has traced a lineage through all previous popes?
Well, and also
the thing is like even Catholics don't realize that there is a strain of anti-capitalism within the Catholicism. American Catholics, anyway.
Well, and also in Europe, I would say that the more conservative, and there are a lot of conservative Catholics in Europe as well. First of all, the American brain rot is exported to Europe through these utter right-wing nutters in the Catholic field. I would mention Taylor Marshall or people like that.
Yeah.
But also the anti-capitalist and anti-liberal strands of Catholicism in Europe is often taken also as more conservative anti-modernist.
Yes. I was going to say that there's a lot of the hardcore anti-capitalists in Europe are, conservatives.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Those on the Catholic, on the new right that are Catholic are going to be among those that would be anti-capitalists.
And these are political forces in Europe that are almost as laissez-faire and or neoliberal as the social democratic parties.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, quite often more. I would say that they are very Trumpian in that way. Basically just a bunch of grifters who perform social sadism.
Right.
Towards their chosen victims. And that, the far right-wing parties in Europe, Front National, the Swedish Democrats, and so on and so forth, are basically Trumpian.
Yeah.
And the main old right-wingers, in Sweden, the moderates, Germany, the Christian Democrats, the Tories, have returned to the pre-war conservative agenda of this radical social sadism as well. I would also...
Right.
Okay, so we are going to start in on chapter 1 of Laudato Si, titled "What is Happening to Our Common Home?" And whose job was it to read this? Was that yours, Jason?
Yeah, it was mine.
Okay, so I know we're not going to like stick to that, but could you like maybe get us started?
Sure. I think would like to start with that very first the first section, number 17. It says that theological and philosophical reflections on the situation of humanity and the world can sound tiresome and abstract, unless they are grounded in a fresh analysis of our present situation, which is in many ways unprecedented in the history of humanity. And I would just say that is quite an understatement. I like what he says about how our reflections can sound tiresome and abstract, because that's my experience. But then he says, before considering how faith brings new incentives and requirements with regard to the world of which we are a part, I will briefly turn to what is happening to our common home. And I just think that this is such a good introduction. It's like, I'm not going to be tiresome and abstract. I'm going to ground this in something real and something deep and meaningful and loving. And it's what he does.
It reminds me of a famous address Malcolm X gave, where he probably did this more than once, but he said, he basically says, I would now like to speak in a way that everyone can understand.
Yeah.
Which it's not condescending at all. It's basically an invitation and a recognition that this isn't done often, especially from like intellectual pulpits and positions. We're often speaking past people.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
And Pope Francis here, he says, he's really bringing home this idea, like this is for all people, including people of bad will. Like, even if you're not familiar with intellectual discourse and theological reflections, that's okay, because you need to become familiar with this. And he does a really good job of making sure everybody can read it and get something out of it.
Yeah, and I think it's also here his former Jesuit formation really shines through, because like a hallmark of the Jesuit modus operandi is always to bring each intellectual and spiritual insight back to the personal life.
Yeah.
Like that's like there are different charisms and different ways of proceeding in different orders, and the Jesuits are really rooted in the spiritual exercises, which is all about that. Like, okay, what does that abstract statement mean for my personal life and my personal relationship with creation, with prayer, and so on and so forth.
There's a passage I was just rereading. We can return to 18, but in section 19, at the end of it, he says, our goal is not to amass information or to satisfy curiosity, but rather to become painfully aware, to dare to turn what is happening to the world into our own personal suffering, and thus to discover what each of us can do about it.
Well, I mean, and for many people, what is happening in the world, specifically with climate change, which is one of the main factors of this book, is creating personal suffering. So they don't really have to try very hard.
Right.
Yeah. Specifically, as we're speaking right now, I guess there are something like 70 people who have been killed by massive flooding in central Texas, which, of course, there are any number of reasons that could have happened, but we shouldn't discount like unpredictable weather patterns as part of the reason why this happened. Of course, like defunding the National Weather Service probably isn't helpful either, but yeah.
Well, and like in Europe, we have this unprecedented heat wave, which is killing an untold amount of person in Central Europe, such as France and Italy and Spain as well. So, like, this has really become our everyday reality. And I think what he's pointing out is that, like, we often live in this really wounded reality, and we do not always make the analytical connections and distinction. Okay, this is what's going on, this is what's going on, this is what's going on, and when people do that, the second step of integrating that into your own life and understanding of the world does not naturally follow from all of these catastrophes, and as well as the third step, which is conversion. Like, okay, now I've seen all of this shit happening. I have understood that it's a part of my being, and now I'll have to change my way of being in this world as a response. It's a third pointed process, which is very much rooted in the Ignatian exercises.
Yeah, and one thing I think that he does, what I like a lot about this is he does not. This is not like you should care about what's happening to people. You know, like this is not an intellectual finger wagging. He says,
right.
Although change is part of the working of complex systems, the speed with which human activity has developed contrasts with the naturally slow pace of biological evolution. Change is something desirable, yet it becomes a source of anxiety when it causes harm to the world and to the quality of life of much of humanity. This is real living stuff. Like, there's no intellectual argument about why this matters to you or why it should matter to you. It just already does. All he's really doing is just trying to piece it together in a way which is it's not tiresome and abstract.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what he's trying to do is a collective recollection of sins. Like, okay,
yeah,
we are a part of these systems, which is hard to understand. How can we see our own personal and societal sin and brokenness and misfortune as part of our own lives and failings?
Right, but it's not this I suppose concretizing our connection by way of fallenness or brokenness. It isn't a fatalism. And the way that, say, I was just thinking of comparing what we're reading and talking about to the evangelical mandate I was brought up with, which is kind of a strange, like, salvation is abstracted into a purely cosmic afterlife kind of realm and then resubstantiated. So I was given the burden of people's separation from God forever after death, and feeling the sort of Christian compassion of that. But at the same time, I was abstracted from and separated from real world suffering. And this is sort of resubstantiating both in the same plane.
That is so much more articulate and much clearer than what I said. That's what I was trying to basically get at. But I like the way you put it a lot better. And I also just really like that he said, following a period of irrational confidence in progress and human abilities, some sectors of society are now adopting a more critical approach. I was like, yes, I think that in irrational confidence in progress, that's one of my favorite turns of phrase.
Yeah. He is, for us Marxists, he's really echoing the Frankfurt School there.
Yeah.
And like he points out two particular challenges to our way of understanding and breaking out of this paradigm of irrational optimism, and also to changing our lives. The acceleration of change today is really, really fast, which makes it really hard to like get the bearing about what the heck is going on. And second, which is connected to the first one, but I would say distinct, is what he calls rapidification.
Oh yeah.
Of everyday life.
I wonder what Zygmunt Bauman would say about that.
Good callback.
Yeah.
Good callback. Yeah, I know that Fernandez, who wrote this for Pope Francis, has studied Bauman.
Yeah?
Yeah.
However, he does say change is something desirable.
Yes.
The storied pastime of what we would all do after the revolution. It contains change, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is not a reactionary like anti-modernism. This is just about
An actionary anti-modernism.
Yeah, it's about returning to heart, having the heart of humanity. And like we said when we were talking about the intro, the re-recognition of creation as a matter of the way we should think of the earth in the same way that we think of our siblings.
What you guys have just said is making me realize what a misnomer the word modernism is. Because it's like, whose modernism, right? You might as well just call it alienation.
Modernism? Call modernism alienation?
That's because that's what we mean.
Yes.
That's the meaning of anti-modernism, is being anti-alienation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because like the entire project of modernism has been individuation, right?
Yeah.
Which is has a number of reasons why that's accelerated so quickly recently, but the entire project from the very beginning has been both an economic and a cultural project of creating individuals who are reliant only upon themselves and relate to society only through that lens. So, yeah.
Oh, that, and as well as the cutting up of our episteme in smaller and smaller chunks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we do no longer relate to the world as a single thing, but or the body as a single thing. We cut it up into smaller pieces of understanding. You do no longer die of natural causes. You die of a specific. Even if you're 345 years old, you die of a specific form of cancer in your left toenail or whatever. Yeah. And like I would say that's really how I would define modernism. That specialization and fragmentation of knowledge.
Well, sure, sure. And neoliberalism just like hyper intensifies that.
Yes, that commodifies that and gives it an economic force behind cutting up everything into smaller and smaller pieces of meat that are sold on the meat market. And that leads to what Bauman claims, that like when you cut up the fragments of reality into really small pieces, they cannot be held together. They become liquid instead of solid.
Yeah.
They float around.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, if everything's not cut up into those little pieces, then we can't be tossed and turned with the liquid. We flow with the liquid. If everything's liquid and everything is in little pieces, so there's no stability.
I can't help but extend this metaphor into the way that Christendom operates, especially in the Protestant world. We basically have cut up the body of Christ into tiny pieces. We have our own, to quote Depeche Mode, our own personal Jesus.
Yeah.
And it has no relationship to the rest of everyone else's personal Jesus, really.
Which is one of the heresies of Gnosticism, actually.
Really?
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's when there's a book written by an Episcopal priest that came out. I don't know when it did. I remember I learned about it whenever I was in undergrad, and I was super into Gnosticism, like learning about it, because that's like the sort of rad lib friendly version of Christianity is Gnosticism.
That
because it's
or
like
Pelagianism.
Pelagianism, right? That's true. I will admit that I found Pelagius to be like a sympathetic character, because he's basically an Enlightenment Christian, like a Christian humanist, about 1,000 years before Christian humanism existed.
Uh-oh.
But okay, so I mean, there are caveats to that,
Yeah.
because obviously, Christian humanists still believe that like Christ is necessary for working through salvation, whereas Pelagius was like, oh, you could just work through it on your own. You don't need God. It's like influence in order to be able to do so. But anyway, so that's beside the point. The book is called Against the Protestant Gnostics, and it's about like this high church sort of Episcopal priest sort of railing against modern Protestantism for its like individuated view of the relationship between God and man, and it pretty much makes the case that we would all make about low church Protestantism being like sort of anti-human in the sense that it tends to fragment. It attempts to fragment us even further.
If we're throwing out really good books written by Protestants, there is an economic explanation to that process, which an evangelical pastoral religious scholar wrote in the early aughts. The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind by Noel, who really traces the economic foundations and the cultural foundations of this cutting up of the body of Christ in the U.S. in a really fascinating way.
Oh, see, when you were talking about good books written by Protestants, I was going to say The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, actually, Daniel studied under him, under Noel. But yeah, that's why I know about that book.
It's really good. I can strongly recommend it. Like, it's an economical analysis of why American evangelicalism went haywires into smaller and smaller and more anti-intellectual sects.
Yeah, so the book that I read. I haven't written a book yet. The book that I read, the Against the Protestant Gnostics, I looked it up. It's by Philip J. Lee, is the author, and essentially it's like the main claim is that Protestants reject tradition, sacraments, institutions, and focus on subjective spirituality and the inner light and personal experience of God, despise the material world and the social and political dimensions of that. And then they promote escapism, focusing on heaven, personal salvation, while ignoring, the responsibility that we have to each other and to the planet, which I think that squares pretty nicely.
Well, like, I would claim, and I think I am not sure that Pope Francis would say it like this, because he's far more ecumenical, or was far more ecumenical than I was. But for me, it's all come back to Luther's theory of the two kingdoms.
Yeah. On the subject of Pope Francis and the question of modernity, this is still on the first page of this document, but in number 20, he says that technology, when linked to business interests, is presented as the only way of solving these problems. In fact, proves incapable of seeing the mysterious network of relations between things, and so sometimes solves one problem only to create others.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's myopic.
Yeah, and it's also like this, that you always, which Trotsky Trotskyite economics are really good at pointing out that that you just push the current economic crisis into the future, you displace it.
Yeah.
And he has a beautiful quote as well, phrases that that the consequence of us displacing crisis and monetizing crisis leads to the earth, our home, is beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth.
Right. Because the people in charge think they can treat the earth like they do the market. Mm-hmm. And then the market, they just move one bubble to another. They just keep transitioning from one, migrating around crisis by moving it to some other sector.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and like he said, our industrial system, at the end of its cycle of production and consumption, has not developed the capacity to absorb and reuse waste and byproducts. We have not yet managed to adopt a circular model of production capable of preserving resources for present and future generations, while limiting as much as possible the use of non-renewable resources, moderating their consumption, maximizing their efficient use, reusing and recycling them. I guess another way that I would put it that we have not yet managed because we refuse to try.
Yeah, we refuse to invest.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not only that our current way of thinking is treating the earth like the market. It is more that the earth has become subsumed within the market. We are treating ecology and the earth and climate as just a different aspect of the market.
Right.
It is truly a religious or metaphysical idea, neoliberalism. This idea that the market is this all-encompassing spirit of the world and that ecology is just an aspect of it. Some sort of dark, twisted Hegelianism.
Well, yeah. And I like that when he talks about how industrial waste and pollutants, they kind of they affect people on the margins very, very fully. But he links that to this throwaway culture, which affects the excluded just as quickly reduces things to rubbish. So it's this overall, it's not just a byproduct of the way that we do things. It is how we think of things. It's our entire culture's throwaway culture, and that includes the people who are marginalized,
right?
Or the stream, which is marginalized. Everything's marginalized. It's used up and then thrown away.
We've actually talked about throwaway culture in terms of the way that people deal with each other as well.
Yeah.
And we addressed it from the position of a sort of a Calvinist approach to organizing the left, being that you either have you profess the exact correct beliefs, and if you express heresy, you're ostracized, and that there's just this very throwaway culture among leftists on how to deal with their comrades. And
if you get canceled, you're canceled forever.
Yeah, there's no coming back from it. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's sort of just a kind of a hyper distilled version of the way that human beings are in general with one another. It's you don't know anybody's shit. Take care of yourself and cut people out of your life that don't maximize your potential. Or if people are bringing negativity into your life, cut them out. You don't owe your parents anything. If they're telling you, if they're harshing your mellow or whatever, you can just fucking cut them off.
Yeah.
Right.
There are obviously reasons to cut people off. I'm not against that. And yes, some parents are bad, and you should probably cut them out of your life in order to live a better life. Clearly,
you don't have to like your parents. You only have to love them.
Yeah, but I mean, that this idea, this sort of like kind of yassification of the idea that you should cut people out of your life, you know, like reducing an incredibly complex and very, very just possibly detrimental action to a quick slogan that you can fucking throw up as a caption to your Instagram post or whatever.
Right.
Right. And while obviously Pope Francis is concerned with much, this can be put in very simple terms. Even if you don't care about or even believe in a soul or don't recognize the cultural impact of the dominant way of thinking, whatever. He says that this is in number 24. He says, if present trends continue, this century may well witness extraordinary capitalism and an unprecedented destruction of ecosystems with serious consequences for all of us. Doesn't matter what else you think, it's your doom too.
Yeah, yep. Absolutely. Like, I really like the way he put it before, that we live in a throwaway culture that quickly reduces things to rubbish. And as we all know, the capitalist system reduces people to things and things to rubbish.
Right.
I would also here like to make a call out to one of our enemies, Hannah Arendt, who I think was one of the first political theorists who really grappled with like this fact that we are seeing today, perhaps more starkly than ever, where a large portion of the population are reduced to rubbish, like these large portion of humanities which are no longer necessary or even wanted by the system.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's even the phenomenological way we encounter the other, the marginal. Even if we reject this as a belief, it's the way we encounter people who are homeless. The utter powerlessness that subsumes all things means we don't address it. And I think that goes back to what you were talking about with like the pop psychology and the way that's mobilized to this very toxic individuation. And it's just extrapolated endlessly on social media to, repeat it. This is the version of empowerment we can all afford,
Right, exactly. That's actually the crux of the issue right there. This is a version of like change that costs nothing and changes nothing, but can make you feel as though you are changing things and you're being empowered. Because if you see enough people posting like fucking yassified self-improvement memes, like, then it feels like everybody is becoming enlightened, and it'll make you feel good about yourself while the world is burning down around you and everything is and your exploitation is increasing daily and exponentially, and that's the crux of the issue for sure. I kind of wanted to try to move us along because we're only on basically the first thing touched on by Pope Francis and the first part of the first chapter, and we're about 40 minutes into the episode. We did spend
a whole episode last time on the introduction, which is 16 small paragraphs.
Okay, so along with the toxic throwaway culture that Pope Francis refers to, come the other effects of that. And climate change is part of this, right? And he very clearly notes that it's due to carbon emissions from fossil fuels and deforestation. And talks about how this disproportionately affects the poor and the vulnerable and the people who are least responsible for this damage. And that not only means like the lower classes of the world, but specifically populations in the developing world who don't have don't like Americans, us as working class Americans, we are still contributing to part of that global warming with our massive energy usage, and not to get all third worldist on the podcast or anything. That's Kevin's job. He's not here, but I'll represent Kevin right now. And no, but anyway, not to get third worldist, but like the people that Pope Francis is most specifically referring to would be those poorer populations of the developing world who are, basically all the shit is running downhill and they're at the bottom.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, and I would also like to tie that back to what you, Chris, was saying before about this pop psychology of cutting stuff off, treating certain things like rubbish, out of sight, out of mind. You cut off toxic relationships. And that, I would say, is a material function of how our society is working. Like, we have this huge numbers of refugees escaping these climate catastrophes. And their call to us as brothers and sisters are considered toxic because they need something from us. And
Right.
So toxic.
And our response is therefore to put them in camps out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Y'all have been doing that since before even the United States got in on it, haven't you? Like,
Oh
the
yes,
European-
Sweden. I studied our response to the Jewish refugees from Auschwitz when Auschwitz was liberated, and the response of the Swedish government was to build other camps in the middle of nowhere in Sweden and put all the Jewish refugees there so that nobody else. Sweden is really bad with this sort of stuff.
I was specifically thinking of like the migrant camps that that are built in Hungary and Poland and
Sweden as well. Sweden as well.
Yeah.
It's funny, not funny, but on that note, number 26, he says that many of those who possess more resources and economic or political power seem mostly to be concerned with masking the problems or concealing their symptoms, simply making efforts to reduce some of the negative impacts of capitalism. However, many of these symptoms indicate that such effects will continue to worsen, and it goes on like that for a while.
Yeah.
Well, he then goes on to speak really about the pollution of water and the issues of water.
Right. He's talking about how access to water is a basic human right, and then speaks out against privatization and waste, which when I think about water waste, I think of California as being the one of the worst examples of water waste that I could possibly imagine, where it's such a scarce resource, yet you have farming of
cashews
and almonds and pistachios, which are using a massive amount of water.
Isn't this 60-70% of all the water in California? It's like that, completely absurd.
And then not only that, but if you look at LA is always under incredibly strict water rationing, except for some reason Beverly Hills never is included in that. Or it's just because it's a different city. It's not LA, right? It's a little enclave in the middle of LA, and they don't have water rationing, even though they draw from the same water table that LA does. And if you look at a view of LA from a satellite view of LA, you can see that Beverly Hills is lush and green with swimming pools in every yard, and and then the rest of LA around it is brown looking and dead. Yeah, I mean, it's just there's one rule for them and one rule for us, obviously, right? We already knew that.
It's a MAGA stronghold too.
Yeah, I mean, of course it is.
Amazing. Somehow.
It's funny because don't we hear about all the Hollywood pedophiles that are controlling everyone's minds and turning everyone into liberals?
Yeah.
Don't they all live in Beverly
only
Hills?
The liberal ones. Only the liberal ones. Right? So we all know that it is not possible to sustain this present level of consumption in developed countries and wealthier sections of society. where the habit
Degrowth.
of wasting and discarding has reached unprecedented levels. The exploitation of the planet has already exceeded acceptable limits, and we still have not solved the problem of poverty.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like he's hinting at, and he gets there over the course of this entire text. But right there, he's hinting at the comma, because growth in this manner is not going to solve the problem of poverty. It's only going to destroy the world.
Right.
Right. And this is where the Pope's anti-capitalism comes forward, just is pushed directly to the front of what he's talking about here. We still haven't managed to solve poverty, right? And how would you solve poverty? Like, obviously, as Catholics, you're supposed to. One of the most important things that the church involves itself in, as far as Catholic doctrine is concerned, is charity, right? It's the largest charitable the Catholic Charities is the largest charitable organization in the world. It has like one of the highest ratings of income to output of all charitable organizations in the United States. I'm not sure how it rates in the rest of the world. But that's one of the ways you rate charities, is by looking at what income to output looks like. And a lot of charities eat up a lot of their donations in infrastructure and paying their employees and CEOs and whatnot.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like obviously that this is something that the church puts its money where its mouth is, and it's very important to the church. But aside from that, care for the poor isn't just like a valorization of poverty and a sort of like helping to ease the pains of poverty, but there is a implicit in the idea that you care for the poor is to alleviate the suffering of the poor by making them not poor anymore.
Right.
And that's
Right.
and that is part of Catholic doctrine, is to alleviate the suffering of the poor by making sure there are no more poor, right?
Right.
And that's sort of, and like we mentioned, because of the Protestant brainworm that like has completely rotted out the minds of American Protestants like Taylor Marshall and people like that. That is not something that they think about. Whenever the new Pope was elected, they're like, oh, this is we're really glad that we're moving away from the Marxism of Pope Francis and moving towards a Pope who references Leo the 13th, who wrote an encyclical against Marxism. I'm like, first of all, no, he didn't. Second of all, that encyclical is equally critical of organized socialist movements as it is of capitalism. So that we know that this Pope will be for free markets and and individualism. And I'm like, why the fuck do you think that? What given anything that any Pope has ever written would lead you to think that he supports free markets and individualism?
Well, I would suggest that it might be because they haven't actually read the encyclical that they're referencing.
I mean, I feel like that people like Taylor Marshall would have to have.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And they're just choosing.
But like, we are dealing with fundamentally dishonest actors.
There's also
sure.
Yeah, and like Francis later towards the end of this chapter goes into full critique of capitalism when he points out that the way we today tackle the ecological crisis is through two means. One, the enclosure and privatization of nature and earth in itself, and the second is what you pointed out in Beverly Hill, this sort of enclaves that are good to live in. Like,
right.
Those two models seem to be the only way that we today are tackling the problem. And Francis' point is that those are not enough.
Right.
Yeah. In the interest of trying to make sure we don't only talk about half of this chapter, I'm just gonna make some references to the I circled some numbers. Let's see if we can see how far we get by just mentioning this. Number 28, Pope Francis talks about how at critical moments, which are still in the water sections, the lack of sufficient oversight and impartiality in the administration of resources, which is a really nice way to say it. Number 32, he calls that a short-sighted approach to the economy. And then,
Right.
in number 34, he talks about how we seem to think that we can substitute the irreplaceable beauty of the earth with something which we create ourselves. And we talked about that a while ago, the last time. And then he talks about in number 36, how no one who is looking for a quick and easy profit is interested in solving these issues. And
Yeah.
and then that leads into talking about global inequality. And he says that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach.
Right.
Right.
Well, the anti-capitalism that is becoming more stringent is it doesn't lead with ideology. It leads as a matter of realism. It's just reckoning with the reality. It's addressed to people, even to people who ideologically are predisposed to markets because they don't believe history has proven an alternative. It's addressed to them as well, under the auspices of realism. There's not a trying to convince us to believe in the right political faith. It's just convincing us to see what is happening before our eyes.
Right, like he says that the human environment and the natural environment deteriorate together. We cannot adequately combat environmental degradation unless we attend to causes related to human and social degradation. So it doesn't really. I mean, it helps, of course, if you are of goodwill, if you're motivated by, if you're moved by suffering. It just happens to be that we cannot adequately combat one without the other.
Right.
These things are intricately linked, no matter what you think, no matter what you believe, no matter what you want to think. Just they are inextricably linked.
Yeah. I think a concept that we haven't touched upon, and he only mentioned it twice, is the concept of mental pollution, which makes this our leap of understanding the scope of the problem and our ability to act even more difficult. Because we live in an economy and a culture which is so harsh to live in that in order to survive mentally, a lot of us are forced to retreat into the mental pollutions that follows from the material pollutions. Like we escape into distractions of social media, of TikTok, of porn, of whatever, because we are too horror-struck by the sins and the states of the world.
Right.
And mental pollution is basically all these distractions which pull at our minds through technology, through culture, which makes it harder for us to confront the reality of the situation in the world, but I think most importantly, the reality of the situations within ourselves, and that we need to turn around and make a clean break also within our personal lives.
Right, yeah, and I think that's important. When he talks about weak responses, later on in this same chapter, it's not just selfish interests. It's not just the greed of the powerful, but it's in general. Like we're too busy doom scrolling, not because we're distracted, but because we've stopped allowing ourselves to feel these things. Maybe even we know them. Maybe we even fundamentally kind of whatever, we care something. That's why we post. That's why we put a flag picture on our Facebook or whatever. But like he said, it's remarkable how weak international political responses have been. The failure of global summits on the environment make it plain that our politics are subject to technology and finance. And he goes on like that for a while. Then he says, where does he say here? What he just talks about the false and superficial ecology, which bolsters complacency. Like if you be really motivated by something, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna recycle, or I'm gonna go pick up trash, I'm gonna turn off the lights, turn the air up when I leave the house,
drive an electric car. Yeah,
you're gonna do things. You're gonna try. You're gonna do your part, and then you find out that there are 56 private jets flying to Jeff Bezos' wedding. What the hell? Why would I even care? Why would I do anything?
Yeah. When you look at recycling programs too, in the United States, most of our recycling was sold to China for China to recycle, and then as soon as China quit accepting it, we just started shifting to dumping recycling into landfills instead, while still labeling it recycling. So it's it's that meme that has the two doors leading to the one door. That's exactly what's going on.
Yeah, talk about spectacle.
Yeah, right?
Masking landfills.
Yep.
Well, the bit you were talking about just a moment ago, Mir, is section 47, and I think it's important just to mention it isn't merely that we're treating to spectacle. It is that spectacle has captured us. It is omnipresent. So yes, we do turn to it, but we don't even have to. It's already turns to us. It's like being able to learning how to live wisely, think deeply, and love generously. It is jammed. Like we are being culture jammed. To reference Adbusters.
I like this question.
Old Adbusters.
It's on number 57. He said, what would induce anyone at this stage to hold on to power, only to be remembered for their inability to take action when it was urgent and necessary to do so? I just think that's Emmanuel Macron. Like, what would induce someone at why even bother having power? You're not going to be remembered as even as cool as Napoleon III.
Yeah.
Or Keir Starmer, who has earned the nickname from his own party of Never Hear Keir, because he's always running around Europe trying to shore up support for Ukraine, while his country is in a massive budget crisis and they're cutting welfare to they just tried to, I don't think it worked, cut welfare payments for heating oil to pensioners over the winter.
They rolled that partially back, but not completely.
Yeah.
I mean, the situation in Britain is really wild. Usually we in Europe has thought Europe is bad, but we're not as bad as you guys. But when we look at the amount of poverty and destitution in Great Britain, I actually think that if you look at the statistics, it's on par with the poorest part of the United States now.
Yeah, it would make sense.
Yeah, it's really turning into a banana republic, and I can understand why people like Orban or Trump or Maloney would want to have power, because they are Maloney I don't know so well, but the others are basically grifters who just want to enrich themselves. But I think it's really hard to understand, and that's what Pope Francis is getting at. Why do the centrists want power when they don't do anything with it?
What do you want power for?
Yeah. What would Camilla Harris have done? She's not even corrupt.
She's not sophisticated enough to be corrupt.
People point to Joe Biden like having like a net worth of $500,000 or something like that, and say like look, he's not a grifter. He's an honest politician. I was like, this fucking chump has been like the attack dog for the credit card companies for his entire career and hasn't even managed to get rich off of it. What a loser.
Well, this is the thing that honest centrists, when they're when they reference Obama as the most successful president in our lifetimes, it all hinges on his restraint, on basically maintaining the status quo and keeping it from getting worse. That is what they promise, actually. They don't actually deliver that, but that is the centrist goal, is restraint.
So on that note, the number 61 is the last of the, I don't know what to call them. I'll say aphorisms, that's not right.
Paragraphs.
Yeah, just whatever, the last paragraph. He says, on many concrete questions, the church has no reason to offer a definitive opinion. She knows that honest debate must be encouraged among experts, while respecting divergent views. But we need only to take a frank look at the facts to see that our common home is falling into serious disrepair. The last line in this chapter, which is the last line in this paragraph, says, if we scan the regions of our planet, we immediately see that humanity has disappointed God's expectations.
We do be doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, and like that is really what the points of this chapter is, and he also uses previously the notion of the globalization of indifference. Which is our response to this disappointment of God.
So, is that the last paragraph in chapter 1?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We kind of skipped over like a lot. Sort of his going from talking about the water issue to talking about loss of biodiversity, right? Species like
talk about like
species extinction. Yeah. And I thought that
more.
Well, I mean, I thought that it was worth pointing out, like when he talked about mass species extinction, that like deforestation, overfishing, like ecosystem destruction, that like all of these things have their intrinsic value to creation, and that destroying biodiversity is like destroying something that was put in place by God, and like that this is just disrupting a sacred creation, right? It's more so than just like not being a good steward of the resources that you were put in charge of, the way that Protestants think of it. But this is like God's holy creation. This is like think of your child building a sandcastle and smiling at you, and you just walk over to it and just kick it over, right? It's something that is something that the way that sandcastle is precious to that child is the way that God's creation is precious to God. And to destroy it is to like just like say, fuck you, God.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that is implied in here, and that is sort of like Catholics, if they really believe what they claim to believe, don't need re-enchantment, because the world is already enchanted. Not as much as, say, the animists would say that it is, right? Like Kevin would think of the way that the world is enchanted, and the way that all things have like a spiritual worth of their own, in a different way than Catholics would. But like Catholics do believe that like God's spirit flows through his creation, so that an assault on God's creation is an assault on God, right? And in that way, that the world is as enchanted as the pagans would believe it is.
So earlier I was mentioning the sort of rhetorical ordering of like leading with realism, but I don't mean to say that he's not attending to that with sort of, I think he's arguing that the Catholic social teaching sees the real more accurately than the capitalist sort of realism we've been taught. And one of the ways he does that is by weaving these together. The climate is in 23. The climate is a common good belonging to all and meant for all. And 43. Human beings too are creatures of this world, enjoying a right to life and happiness and endowed with unique dignity. 44. We were not meant to be inundated by cement, asphalt, glass, and metal, and deprived of physical contact with nature. That wonderful bit you were talking about, Mir, at 45, about the Beverly Hillification of the world. The privatization of certain spaces has restricted people's access to places of particular beauty. Ecological neighborhoods have been created, which are closed to outsiders in order to ensure an artificial tranquility.
Yeah, that's it's kind of valuable to not skip over that. That's like, really, that's kind of the essence of this.
Well, yes, like he's a good, like if we are to make an analytical distinction between the realist and the religious elements here, like he's pointing out that the world in itself has a material telos that we are betraying, that we cannot continue to live in this way even due to purely egoistical ways, like we are killing ourselves. But it then adds grace on top of that, like the notion of God, of religious grace as something that do not replace but completes creation. And our understanding of the ecological crisis is not replaced by the notion of God, but completed by the notion of creation.
Yeah.
So this section goes on to say, after talking about biodiversity and destroying biodiversity, that is also the quite inequality of human life, and that includes like the worsening of social inequalities, and then of course we mentioned that overcrowding is kind of mentioned in what the piece that Ben just read, like urban chaos, overcrowding, and just like the negative effect on mental and physical health that is accompanied by that, and then of course spiritual health as well. Just like, so, I mean, like, mixed up in all of this is the fact that there is massive technological growth, but it doesn't benefit the poor. And
I really like
and that there's no ethical guidelines for how this technology should unfold.
Number 47, which is like the effects of digital media. He says that when media and the digital world become omnipresent, their influence can stop people from learning how to live wisely, to think deeply, and to love generously.
Right.
In this context, the great sages of the past run the risk of going unheard amid the noise and distractions of an information overload. And then, skipping ahead, he says, true wisdom, as the fruit of self-examination, dialogue, and generous encounter between persons, is not acquired by a mere accumulation of data, which eventually leads to overload and confusion, a sort of mental pollution. Real relationships with others, with all the challenges that they entail, now tend to be replaced by a type of internet communication which enables us to choose or eliminate relationships at whim, thus giving rise to a new type of contrived emotion, which has more to do with devices and displays than with people and with nature. Today's media do enable us to communicate and to share our knowledge and affections, yet at times they also shield us from direct contact with the pain, the fears, and the joys of others, and the complexity of their personal experiences. For this reason, we should be concerned that, alongside the exciting possibilities offered by these media, a deep and melancholic dissatisfaction with interpersonal relations, or a harmful sense of isolation, can also arise.
But Jason, just as if we would actually let the invisible hand of the market do its work, eventually all life would be sustained and all boats would rise if we just plug in enough data to AI.
That's true.
It will solve all these problems for us. So we have to have faith that the new invisible hand of AI, with enough data.
That is the problem with Pope Francis. He just didn't have enough faith.
He didn't have enough data.
Аборты крестьяне не смогут прожить без нас. Без нас некому будет установить порядок, определить работу, труду. Без нас все развалится и государство распадется.